Tonight, a violent storm will force a single father to drive his billionaire CEO boss home, and that decision will change everything. When rumors spread through the company, they'll both have to choose: run from the truth simmering between them or face it head on. Can love survive when power, judgment, and fear try to tear it apart? Follow my story to the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The office was never supposed to be empty at 7:30 on a Wednesday night, but here Ethan Blake was, alone in the fluorescent hum of the 7th floor, debugging code that should have been finished 2 days ago. His daughter's daycare had called 3 times. His phone sat face down on the desk, vibrating like a guilty conscience. Outside, the sky had turned the color of a bruise. He rubbed his eyes, squinted at the screen, and tried to remember the last time he'd eaten something that wasn't microwaved. The cursor blinked. The rain started. Not the polite kind of rain, the kind that announces itself, that slams against glass and doesn't ask permission. Within seconds, it was hammering the windows, turning the world outside into a smeared gray nothing. Ethan swore under his breath and reached for his jacket. That's when he heard the footsteps. Heels, sharp, precise, unmistakable. He froze. No one else was supposed to be here. The cleaning crew didn't come until 9, and his team had bolted the second the clock hit 5. But those footsteps didn't hesitate. They came straight down the hall, purposeful, and stopped just outside his cubicle. "Blake!" He looked up. Victoria Hale stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights, her tailored suit jacket still buttoned, her expression unreadable. She looked like she'd walked out of a boardroom and into a thunderstorm and refused to acknowledge either. "Ms. Hale." He stood too quickly, almost knocked over his coffee mug. "I didn't know you were still here." "I wasn't planning to be." Her eyes flicked to the windows, where the rain was now coming down in sheets. "My driver's stuck on the other side of the bridge. Accident. Traffic's not moving." Ethan nodded, unsure what she wanted him to do about it. Victoria Hale didn't ask for help. She didn't need to. She was 30 years old, ran a company worth $3 billion, and had a reputation for being so competent it made other people nervous. He'd worked for her for 2 years and could count on one hand the number of times they'd spoken directly. She was looking at him now, though, waiting. "Do you need me to call someone?" he asked. "I need a ride." The words hung there, flat and impossible. Ethan blinked. "A ride? Unless you were planning to sleep here." He glanced at his desk, at the half-finished code, at his phone still buzzing with messages from the daycare. His daughter was probably already in the overflow room, playing with the same 3 toys she'd been playing with since Monday. He should have left an hour ago. "I can drive you," he heard himself say. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed, just barely. "Thank you." She turned and walked back down the hall without waiting for him to follow. Ethan grabbed his keys, his jacket, his phone, and tried not to think about what his car looked like, or smelled like, or the fact that there was probably a juice box rolling around under the passenger seat. By the time they reached the parking garage, the storm had turned vicious. Wind whipped through the concrete levels, carrying rain sideways. Ethan's car, a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the bumper and a sticker on the back window that said "Baby on Board," looked even worse than he remembered. Victoria didn't comment. She just opened the passenger door, slid in, and buckled her seatbelt. Ethan got in, started the engine, and pretended not to notice her glancing at the empty sippy cup in the cup holder. "Where to?" he asked. She rattled off an address he didn't recognize, somewhere uptown. Expensive. He plugged it into his phone and pulled out of the garage, windshield wipers working overtime, the rain turning everything into a drowning blur. For the first 5 minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either, just the awkward quiet of 2 people who didn't know each other outside of email chains and Monday morning meetings. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Victoria kept hers on her phone, scrolling through something that made her frown. Then the traffic hit. Not slow traffic, dead traffic. A wall of red taillights stretching as far as he could see, unmoving. Ethan leaned forward, squinting through the rain. "What the hell?" Victoria looked up. "The bridge." "The accident?" "Probably." She set her phone down. "They'll reroute eventually." Eventually turned out to be 40 minutes. 40 minutes of sitting in a car that smelled faintly of old French fries, listening to the rain, watching the clock tick forward while his phone kept buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from the daycare. Ethan texted back one-handed, apologized, promised he'd be there soon, then looked at the unmoving line of cars ahead and felt his chest tighten. "Problem?" Victoria asked. "My daughter." He didn't mean to say it out loud, but it was out now, so he kept going. "Daycare closes at 8. I'm not going to make it." Victoria glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 7:40. "Do you have someone who can pick her up?" "Not really. His parents lived 3 states away. His ex-wife was remarried, living in another city, barely involved. There was no one." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then she picked up her phone, dialed, and spoke in the brisk, no-nonsense tone she used in meetings. "This is Victoria Hale. I need a favor." Ethan tried not to listen, but the car was small and she wasn't whispering. By the time she hung up, he'd pieced together that she'd called someone, a personal assistant maybe, and arranged for a car service to pick up his daughter, take her to his apartment, and wait with her until he got there. He stared at her. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She didn't look at him. "But you're doing me a favor. It seemed fair." The traffic started moving, slowly, painfully, but moving. Ethan shifted into gear and tried to focus on driving instead of the strange, disorienting feeling that Victoria Hale, his boss, had just solved a problem he didn't think had a solution. By the time they reached her address, the rain had eased into something merely torrential. Ethan pulled up to a tall, elegant building with a doorman and soft lighting, the kind of place that probably had a name like The Residences or The Collection. Victoria unbuckled her seatbelt, then paused. "Do you want to come in?" Ethan's brain short-circuited. "What?" "You've been in traffic for an hour. You probably need to use a bathroom, and I'm guessing you haven't eaten." She pushed the door open, rain immediately soaking her shoulder. "Come on." He should have said no, should have thanked her, driven home, picked up his daughter, and forgotten this night ever happened. But his phone buzzed again, confirmation that the car service had arrived, that his daughter was safe, that he had time. And before he could think about it, he was following Victoria Hale through the rain, into the lobby, and up an elevator that moved so smoothly he couldn't even feel it. Her apartment was not what he expected. It was big, sure, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sleek furniture, the kind of kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But it wasn't cold. There were books stacked on the coffee table, a blanket draped over the back of the couch, a pair of sneakers kicked off by the door. Victoria shrugged out of her jacket, hung it on a hook, and looked at him. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll order food." "You don't have to—" "Blake." She cut him off, not unkindly. "Sit down." So he did. He sat on the couch, careful not to disturb the blanket, and watched as Victoria moved through the apartment, ordering Thai food on her phone, pulling 2 glasses out of a cabinet, pouring water like this was normal, like she invited employees to her house all the time. She didn't, though. He knew that. Everyone knew that. Victoria Hale was untouchable, unreachable. She didn't do casual. And yet here she was, handing him a glass of water and sitting down on the other end of the couch, tucking one leg under her like she was tired of holding herself together. "How old is your daughter?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. 5. Her name's Lily. Victoria nodded. "That's a good age. You have kids?" "No." She took a sip of water. "But I was 5 once. I remember it being good." There was something in the way she said it, something small and unguarded, that made Ethan realize he'd never really looked at her before. Not like this. Not as a person who got tired, who remembered being a kid, who maybe didn't want to sit alone in this big empty apartment. "Thank you," he said, "for calling someone, for the car service. I don't know what I would have done." "You would have figured it out." She set her glass down. "You always do." "What makes you say that?" "Because I pay attention." She looked at him then, directly, and he realized her eyes weren't cold at all. They were just careful. "You're a good developer, Blake, but more than that, you show up every day, even when you're exhausted, even when everyone else calls in sick or leaves early. You show up." He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that showing up was all he had, that if he stopped, even for a second, everything would fall apart. So he just nodded. The food arrived. They ate on the couch, containers spread out on the coffee table, rain still coming down outside. Victoria asked about Lily, what she liked, what she was learning, whether she was in kindergarten yet. Ethan answered, found himself talking more than he had in months, telling stories about parent-teacher conferences and bedtime negotiations, and the way Lily pronounced spaghetti. Victoria laughed. Actual laughter. Quiet, but real. She sounds stubborn. She is. Gets it from her mom. Or from you. He smiled. Maybe. They talked about work, about the project he'd been debugging, about the upcoming board meeting that had Victoria working 14-hour days. She didn't talk about it the way she did in meetings. Formal, strategic, untouchable. She talked about it like it was hard. Like she was tired. Like she didn't always know if she was doing the right thing. Do you ever wish you'd done something else? Ethan asked. Victoria looked at him. What do you mean? I don't know, something quieter, less pressure. She was quiet for a long moment. Every day. He hadn't expected her to say that. Hadn't expected the honesty. Why don't you? Because I built this. She gestured vaguely at the apartment, at the windows, at the city beyond. And I don't know who I am without it. The words hung between them, heavy and true. Ethan understood that. Understood it more than she probably realized. He'd built his life around Lily, around being the parent who stayed, who didn't leave, who held everything together even when it was hard. And some days he didn't know who he was outside of that either. He opened his mouth to say so, but his phone buzzed. The car service, letting him know Lily was home, fed, and asking for him. He checked the time. Almost 10. I should go, he said. Victoria nodded, but she didn't get up right away. Just sat there, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you for the ride, she said finally. Thank you for dinner, and for Lily. Blake? He paused at the door, jacket half on. This stays between us, she said. Not because I'm ashamed, but because people talk. He understood. Of course he did. It never happened. She smiled, small, almost sad. Right. He left, took the elevator down, stepped out into the rain that had finally eased into something manageable. Drove home, paid the car service, thanked them, went inside and found Lily asleep on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit. He picked her up carefully, carried her to bed, tucked her in. Stood there for a minute, just watching her breathe. Then he went to his own room, sat on the edge of the bed, and thought about Victoria Hale sitting alone in her apartment, pretending she didn't wish things were different. The next morning, Ethan walked into the office expecting everything to be normal. Same desk, same code, same routine. But the moment he stepped off the elevator, he felt it. The shift. People looked at him. Not openly, not obviously, but in that sideways way that meant they were talking. He ignored it, sat down, opened his laptop, pulled up the project he'd been working on, focused. Hey, Ethan. He looked up. Marcus, one of the other developers, was leaning against the cubicle wall, trying too hard to look casual. Hey. So, late night last night? Ethan frowned. Yeah, traffic was bad. Right, traffic. Marcus grinned. That why you were with the boss? The words hit like cold water. What? Someone saw you, leaving with Victoria, getting into your car. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Pretty cozy. Ethan's stomach dropped. It wasn't, she needed a ride, that's it. Sure, man. Whatever you say. Marcus pushed off the wall, still grinning. Just saying, people are talking. He walked away before Ethan could respond. Ethan sat there, staring at his screen, feeling the weight of it settle over him. People are talking. He wanted to believe it would blow over, that it was just gossip, just noise, just the kind of thing that happened in offices. But he knew better. He'd seen what happened when people decided to care about something, how fast it spread, how much it stuck. By lunchtime, half the office had heard. By the end of the day, it was a fact. Ethan Blake and Victoria Hale were involved. He didn't see her all day. She was in meetings, probably, back to back, locked behind closed doors. He thought about emailing her, warning her, but what would he even say? People saw us. They're making assumptions. I'm sorry. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't hers either. But it didn't matter. The story was already written. When he got home that night, Lily ran to him, tackled his legs, demanded mac and cheese. He made it, ate with her, read her 3 books, tucked her in, sat on the couch afterward and stared at his phone, debating whether to text Victoria. He didn't. What could he say that wouldn't make it worse? The rumors escalated. By Friday, the story had evolved. They weren't just involved, they were having an affair, a secret relationship. Ethan was getting special treatment, promotions he hadn't earned, projects he didn't deserve. Victoria was compromised, distracted, playing favorites. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter. The narrative had momentum. Ethan heard it in the break room, in the elevator, in the bathroom, when two guys didn't realize he was in the stall. They talked about him like he wasn't a person, like he was a scandal, a joke, a problem to be solved. He wanted to defend himself, to stand up and shout that nothing had happened, that it was just a ride in the rain, just one night, but he knew how that would sound, desperate, defensive, guilty. So he kept his head down, did his work, ignored the looks, the whispers, the emails that went silent when he joined a thread. Victoria didn't ignore it. On Monday, she called an all-hands meeting. The entire company packed into the main conference room, standing room only. Ethan stood in the back, tried to make himself invisible. Victoria walked in, stood at the front, and didn't waste time. "I'm aware there's been some talk," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "About my judgment, my professionalism, my ability to lead this company." The room was silent. "Let me be clear," she continued. "I don't owe anyone an explanation for my personal life, but I do owe you transparency about how this company is run. So here it is. I gave an employee a ride home during a storm. That's it. If you have concerns about favoritism or conflicts of interest, bring them to HR. If you have concerns about my leadership, bring them to the board. But if you're spreading rumors because you're bored or because you think it's entertaining, stop." She paused, let the words land. "We have work to do, important work, and I won't let gossip distract us from it." She looked around the room, met a dozen pairs of eyes. "Are we clear?" Silence. Then, slowly, people nodded. Victoria didn't smile, just nodded back and walked out. The meeting dissolved. People filtered back to their desks, murmuring, unsure. Ethan stayed where he was, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. She'd stood up. For him. For both of them. But he could still see it, the doubt in people's faces, the skepticism. Victoria had drawn a line, but lines could be crossed, and this one already had been. That night, Ethan stayed late again. Not because he had to, but because he didn't want to go home, didn't want to sit in his apartment and think about the mess he'd somehow become part of. He was halfway through a function when footsteps echoed down the hall. He knew who it was before she appeared. Victoria stopped at his cubicle, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You're still here." "Yeah. You should go home." "So should you." She almost smiled, almost. "Fair." They stood there for a moment, not quite looking at each other. Then Victoria sighed, ran a hand through her hair. "I'm sorry." Ethan blinked. "For what?" "For putting you in this position. For making it worse." "You didn't make it worse. You stood up for us." "Did I?" She looked at him then, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she was carrying. "Or did I just paint a bigger target?" He didn't have an answer for that. Victoria leaned against the cubicle wall, suddenly looking less like a CEO and more like someone who'd been fighting too long. "I don't know how to fix this, Blake." "Neither do I." "We could pretend it never happened, avoid each other, let it fade." "Is that what you want?" She was quiet for a long time, then quietly, "No." The word hung between them, impossible and true. "But I don't see how this works," she continued. "You're my employee. I'm your boss. Even if nothing happened, people believe it did. And that belief has power." Ethan knew she was right, knew it was logical, smart, the reasonable thing to do, but he also knew he was tired of being reasonable, tired of pretending he didn't feel something shifting every time she looked at him. "What if we didn't avoid each other?" he said. Victoria looked up. "What?" "What if we just work together, openly, let people see there's nothing to hide?" "That's a terrible idea." "Probably." She laughed, short, surprised. "You're serious?" "I don't know. Maybe." He shrugged. I just think running makes it worse. Makes it look like we're guilty. Victoria studied him, something shifting in her expression. You're not what I expected, Blake. What did you expect? Someone easier to manage. He smiled. Sorry to disappoint. You're not. She pushed off the wall, straightened. Okay, we don't hide. We work. We let the results speak for themselves. And if people keep talking, then they talk. She met his eyes. But they won't be able to say we didn't earn it. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't even a plan. But it was something, a way forward that didn't involve disappearing or pretending. Victoria turned to leave, then paused. Blake? Yeah? Thank you for not running. Thank you for not firing me. She smiled, small, real. Not yet. And then she was gone, heels clicking down the empty hallway, leaving Ethan alone with his computer and the strange, terrifying feeling that he'd just agreed to something he didn't fully understand. The decision to work together openly turned out to be harder than either of them anticipated. Not because of the work itself. That part was easy, almost natural. But because proximity made everything else complicated. The project Victoria assigned them was high stakes, the kind that would either prove they were professionals or confirm every rumor circulating through the office. A complete overhaul of the company's client management system, due for presentation to the board in 6 weeks. It required late nights, collaboration, constant communication. All the things that would normally be unremarkable between a CEO and a senior developer, except now every interaction was scrutinized. Ethan felt the eyes on him constantly, walking into Victoria's office for meetings, responding to her emails, sitting in conference rooms where other people pretended not to watch them. The pressure was suffocating, but he'd learned a long time ago how to work under pressure. Being a single parent had taught him that. What he hadn't learned was how to ignore the way Victoria's voice changed when she was tired, dropping the formal edge and becoming something softer, or the way she rubbed her temples during budget reviews, like she was carrying the weight of the entire company behind her eyes, or the way she remembered details. That Lily had a dentist appointment on Thursday, that he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, that he'd mentioned wanting to learn Python better. She noticed things, and that noticing felt dangerous. On the second week of the project, they were working late again, 9:30, the office empty except for the janitors and the distant hum of the HVAC system. Ethan was deep in code, trying to debug a data migration issue that had been plaguing him for 3 days, when Victoria appeared with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this, she said, setting one on his desk. He looked up, surprised. Thanks. She pulled up a chair, sat down next to him instead of hovering like most executives did. Show me what you're working on. It's kind of technical. Blake, I built half this company's infrastructure before we could afford to hire developers. Show me. So he did. Walked her through the problem, a legacy database that didn't want to play nice with the new system, data types that refused to convert, error messages that made no sense. Victoria leaned in, studied the screen, asked questions that were sharp and specific. Within 20 minutes, she'd spotted the issue he'd been missing, a naming convention mismatch so obvious he couldn't believe he hadn't seen it. There, she said, pointing. That table reference. It's looking for client_ID with a capital D, but your migration script is outputting lowercase. Ethan stared at the screen. You're kidding. Check it. He did. She was right. 3 days of frustration solved by someone actually looking at the problem with fresh eyes, instead of battering against it alone. How did you see that? He asked. Victoria shrugged. I've made that mistake before. Many times. I thought you were supposed to be perfect. She laughed, short, self-deprecating. That's what everyone thinks. Reality's more disappointing. I don't think you're disappointing. The words came out before he could stop them. Victoria went still, her expression shifting into something he couldn't read. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The office felt smaller, quieter, like the rest of the world had fallen away. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and whatever moment had existed vanished. Board member, she said, standing. I need to take this. She was gone before he could respond, leaving him alone with his coffee and the uncomfortable realization that he'd meant what he said. That somewhere in this last 2 weeks, between the project meetings and the late nights, and the careful professionalism. He'd stopped seeing Victoria Hale as his untouchable boss and started seeing her as someone real, someone he wanted to know better. That thought should have terrified him, should have sent him running back to the safety of employee handbooks and professional boundaries. But instead, it just settled into his chest, heavy and undeniable. He fixed the code, tested it, confirmed the migration would work. Sent Victoria a message. "You were right. It's working now. Thank you." She didn't respond that night, but the next morning there was a new message in his inbox. "Good work. See you at the 10 a.m. status meeting." Formal, professional, exactly what it needed to be. Except underneath, she'd added, "And stop working until midnight. Your daughter needs you home." Ethan stared at that line for longer than he should have. Then he closed his laptop and went to pick up Lily. The project consumed the next 3 weeks. Long days bled into longer nights, weekends disappeared into sprint planning and testing cycles, and somewhere in the chaos, Ethan stopped noticing the whispers. Or maybe he just stopped caring. There was too much work to do, too many problems to solve, too many moments when Victoria would look at him across a conference table and he'd know exactly what she was thinking without her saying a word. They developed a rhythm, a shorthand. He'd start a sentence and she'd finish it. She'd identify a problem and he'd already be coding the solution. Other team members noticed. Marcus commented on it once, said they worked like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know how to explain that working with Victoria felt like finding a frequency he didn't know he'd been searching for. But the pressure was building, not from the work. The work was going well, better than expected, but from everything around it. The rumors hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd gotten more specific, more vicious. Someone started a betting pool on when Victoria would promote him. Someone else suggested he was ghostwriting her board presentations. The comments were always just quiet enough, just indirect enough, that there was nothing concrete to confront. Ethan tried to ignore it, tried to focus on his code, on the deadlines, on getting home to Lily at reasonable hours. But it was wearing him down, making him second-guess every interaction, every email, every time Victoria asked him to stay late. He wasn't the only one feeling it. Victoria was fraying too, though she hid it better. He saw it in the way her hand shook slightly when she poured coffee, in the way she'd stare at her computer screen for minutes at a time without typing, in the way she'd started closing her office door more often, shutting herself away from the scrutiny. 3 weeks into the project, Marcus cornered Ethan in the break room. "Hey man, can I ask you something?" Ethan was too tired for whatever this was. "Sure." "Is it true you're moving to a lead developer role?" "What? No. Who said that?" Marcus shrugged. "Just what I heard. People are saying Victoria's creating a position for you, special circumstances." "That's not happening." "Okay, but would you tell me if it was?" Ethan set his coffee down harder than he meant to. "Marcus, I'm doing the same job I've always done. Same title, same pay, same everything. Whatever people are saying, it's not true." "Hey, I'm not judging, just asking." "Well, don't." Marcus raised his hands in surrender and backed off, but the damage was done. Ethan could feel the anger simmering under his skin, the frustration of being accused of something he hadn't done, hadn't even thought about doing. He'd worked hard his entire career, never asked for favors, never cut corners, never expected anything he hadn't earned. And now people thought he was getting ahead because of who he knew, not what he could do. He wanted to scream. Wanted to walk into the middle of the office and make everyone listen while he explained exactly how wrong they were. But he knew how that would look. Defensive, guilty. Exactly what they expected. So instead he went back to his desk and buried himself in work. That night, he stayed until almost 11. The office was dark, silent except for the hum of his computer and the occasional creak of the building settling. He was so focused on the screen that he didn't hear Victoria approach until she spoke. "You're still here." He jumped, nearly knocked over his coffee. "Jesus, sorry. Yeah, just finishing up." She stood in the doorway of his cubicle, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking as exhausted as he felt. "Ethan, you need to go home." It was the first time she'd used his first name at work. The sound of it, casual, familiar, did something strange to his chest. "I could say the same to you," he replied. "I live alone. You have a daughter." Lily's at a sleepover. Friend from kindergarten. He leaned back in his chair, rubbed his eyes. I've got time. Victoria didn't move. Just stood there studying him with that expression he'd started to recognize, the one that meant she was thinking something she wasn't sure she should say. What? He asked. Nothing. Victoria. She flinched slightly at the sound of her name. Then she sighed and stepped fully into the cubicle, leaning against the partition. Do you ever regret it? That night I asked you for a ride? The question caught him off guard. No. Why would I? Because your life would be easier if you'd said no. Maybe. He thought about it, about the rumors and the scrutiny and the constant second-guessing. But easier isn't always better. That's naive. Probably. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something raw in her expression, something vulnerable. Do you regret it? Victoria was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, I don't know. I regret what it's cost you, the way people talk about you now. That's my fault. It's not. It is. I'm the one with power here. I'm the one who should have known better. Known better than what? Than treating me like a person? Ethan stood up, suddenly too restless to sit. Victoria, you gave me a ride. You fed me dinner. You helped with my daughter. That's not a scandal. That's just human. Humans don't run billion-dollar companies. Maybe they should. She almost smiled at that. Almost. But then the moment passed, replaced by the exhaustion they were both carrying. We have 3 more weeks on this project. 3 weeks to prove we can deliver results without anyone questioning how we did it. We will. You sound confident. I am. We're good at this. He gestured at his computer, at the code that was finally coming together. Whatever people think about us personally, they can't argue with the work. Victoria nodded slowly, like she was trying to convince herself. You're right. The work speaks for itself. Exactly. She pushed off the partition, straightened. Go home, Blake. Get some sleep. You too. I will. She paused at the entrance of the cubicle, looked back at him. And Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on this. I could say the same to you. She smiled, small, tired, genuine. Then she left, and Ethan was alone again with the quiet office and the uncomfortable awareness that he was in deeper than he'd realized. The breakthrough came during week 4. They'd been testing the new system, running simulations, stress testing the data migration. When Victoria found an edge case no one had considered, a scenario where clients with multiple accounts under different business entities would get merged incorrectly, creating a compliance nightmare. She brought it to Ethan during a morning meeting, explaining the issue in front of the full project team. If we don't catch this now, we'll have legal exposure down the line, potentially millions in fines. The team went silent. This was exactly the kind of thing that could sink a project, something complicated enough that fixing it might require rebuilding entire sections of code. Marcus spoke up first. How did no one catch this in planning? Because none of us thought about it, Victoria said evenly. Which means we need to think about it now. All eyes turned to Ethan. He stared at his laptop, mind already racing through the architecture, the data models, the business logic. I can fix it. How long? Victoria asked. 2 days? Maybe 3. We don't have 3 days. The board presentation is in 2 weeks. Then 2 days. He looked up at her, saw the trust in her eyes even as she was asking him to do the impossible. I'll make it work. She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary. Then she nodded. Do it. The meeting dispersed. Ethan went back to his desk, opened the codebase, and started working. He worked through lunch, through dinner, through the point where his eyes started to blur and his fingers felt numb. Victoria checked in twice, once at 6, once at 9, but she didn't hover, didn't micromanage, just asked if he needed anything and left him to it. By midnight, he had a plan. By 2 a.m., he had a prototype. By 6 a.m., when the sun started creeping through the windows and the early morning crowd began trickling in, he had a solution that actually worked. Victoria found him at 7:30, slumped in his chair, staring at the test results with gritty eyes. Please tell me you didn't work all night, she said. I took a nap at 4. That doesn't count. She moved closer, looked at his screen. Did you fix it? Yeah, look. He walked her through the solution. A middle layer that would catch the edge case before the merge, flag it for manual review, prevent the compliance issue entirely. It was elegant, efficient, and it worked. Victoria leaned over his shoulder, reading the code, and he could smell her perfume, something light and citrus that made his exhausted brain short-circuit slightly. This is brilliant. It's functional. Blake, she straightened, looked at him. This is brilliant. You solved in one night what should have taken a week. He shrugged, too tired to accept the compliment properly. You found the problem. I just fixed it. That's what makes us a good team. The words hung there, and Ethan realized how close she was standing. Close enough that he could see the fatigue lines around her eyes, the way her hair was coming loose from its usual perfect arrangement. Close enough that if he stood up, if he took one step forward, there would be nothing between them. He didn't move. Victoria cleared her throat, stepped back. You should go home, sleep, take the day off. Can't. We need to integrate this with the rest of the system. I'll have someone else do it. Victoria. That's not a request. Her voice was gentle but firm. You've done enough. Go home to your daughter. She was right. He was so tired he could barely think straight, and Lily would be back from her sleepover in a few hours. But leaving felt wrong, like he was abandoning something important. What about you? He asked. What about me? When's the last time you slept? Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'll sleep when the project's done. That's not sustainable. Neither is you working yourself into the ground. She crossed her arms. Go. That's an order from your boss. He wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she was doing the exact same thing, pushing herself beyond reasonable limits. But he was too tired and she was too stubborn, and somewhere in the middle of those truths, he just nodded and started packing up his things. He made it to the elevator before she called after him. Ethan? He turned. She was standing in the hallway, backlit by the early morning sun coming through the office windows. You did good work, she said. Really good. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. He nodded, throat suddenly tight. Thanks. The elevator doors closed. He rode down, walked to his car, drove home in the strange gray light of early morning, let himself into the apartment, collapsed on his bed fully clothed, and slept for 6 hours straight. When he woke up, there were 3 messages on his phone. One from the daycare, confirming Lily's pickup time. One from his ex-wife, asking about summer custody schedules. And one from Victoria. The integration worked perfectly. Well done. He stared at that last message for longer than he should have. Then he got up, showered, and went to pick up his daughter. Lily was full of stories about the sleepover, how they'd stayed up late watching movies, how Emma's mom had made pancakes shaped like hearts, how they'd built a fort out of couch cushions. Ethan listened, smiled, made all the appropriate responses, but part of his brain was still in the office, still thinking about Victoria standing in the hallway, about the way she'd looked at his code like it was something valuable. Daddy, you're not listening, Lily accused. Sorry, sweetheart. I'm listening now. Emma's mom asked if you wanted to come to dinner sometime. She said you probably need adult conversation. Ethan laughed despite himself. Did she? Are you going to go? I don't know, maybe. You should. You're always working. Lily climbed into her car seat, buckled herself in with the fierce independence of a 5-year-old. Do you like your job? The question caught him off guard. Most of the time. Why? Because you look tired, like all the time. Out of the mouths of children. Ethan reached back, squeezed her hand. I'm okay, Lil. Just a busy few weeks. Is it because of your boss, the fancy lady? He froze. What? Emma's mom was talking about it. She said your boss is pretty and everyone at your office thinks you're dating. Ethan's stomach dropped. Lily, we're not dating. She's just my boss. Okay. Lily shrugged, already moving on to the next topic. Can we get ice cream? Sure, yeah, ice cream. He drove to the ice cream shop, bought Lily a cone with sprinkles, sat outside at a picnic table while she ate, and chattered about kindergarten drama. But his mind was elsewhere, stuck on the fact that the rumors had spread beyond the office, that other parents were talking about him, speculating about his life, making assumptions about things they didn't understand. He'd known it was bad. He hadn't realized it was that bad. When they got home, Lily wanted to play tea party. Ethan obliged, sitting cross-legged on the floor with plastic cups and imaginary pastries, trying to be present for his daughter, even as his phone buzzed with work emails. Victoria had sent the test results to the full team, copied him on the thread. People were responding with congratulations, acknowledgments, the kind of professional praise that should have felt good. It felt hollow instead. Because he knew what they were really thinking, knew that even as they congratulated him, they were wondering how much of the credit he actually deserved. That night, after Lily was in bed, Ethan sat on his couch with a beer and his laptop and pulled up the project files. Looked at the code he'd written, the solutions he'd developed, the architecture that was finally coming together. It was good work. He knew it was good work, but knowing it and believing it, actually believing that he'd earned his place on this project, were two different things. His phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. "Are you awake?" He shouldn't respond. It was almost 11, and texting his boss this late would just feed the rumors. But his fingers moved before his brain could stop them. "Yeah." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Can I call you?" His heart rate picked up. "Sure." The phone rang 5 seconds later. He answered, kept his voice low so he wouldn't wake Lily. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you." Victoria sounded tired, strained. I needed to talk to someone." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." A pause, the sound of her moving around. "I had drinks with 2 board members tonight. They asked about the project, about the timeline, about team dynamics." Ethan's chest tightened. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we're on schedule, that the work is solid, that I have full confidence in my team." Another pause. "They asked about you specifically." "What did they say?" "They wanted to know if there was any truth to the rumors, if our working relationship was compromising my judgment." The words landed like a punch. And I told them that the only thing compromising my judgment would be letting gossip determine who I work with." Victoria's voice was steady, but he could hear the exhaustion underneath. "I told them you're one of the best developers we have, that this project wouldn't be succeeding without you, and that anyone suggesting otherwise is more interested in drama than results." Ethan didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process the fact that she'd defended him to the board, put her own reputation on the line. "Thank you," he managed finally. "I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because it's true." She sighed, and he heard the sound of glass clinking. Wine, probably. "But I need you to understand what we're up against. The board is watching, closely. If this project fails, or even if it succeeds, but people still believe we're involved, it's going to be a problem for both of us." "I know. I'm not sure you do." Her voice dropped lower, more serious. "Ethan, if this continues, if the rumors don't stop, there might come a point where I have to make a choice. Between the company and—" She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "Between the company and me," Ethan said quietly. "Yes." He wanted to tell her not to worry about it, that he understood, that he'd never expect her to sacrifice everything she'd built for someone like him, but the words stuck in his throat, choked by the realization that the choice might actually be difficult for her, that he mattered enough to make it complicated. "What do you want to do?" he asked instead. Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, "I want to finish this project. I want to prove that we can work together without it being a scandal. And then I want—" Another pause, heavier this time. "I don't know what I want. That's the problem." Ethan understood that feeling better than she probably realized. He'd been operating on autopilot for so long, work, Lily, repeat, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to want something for himself. Something beyond survival and stability and making sure his daughter had a good life. But lately, sitting in late-night meetings with Victoria, watching her solve problems with a precision that was almost beautiful, feeling the way their minds synchronized when they worked together, he was starting to remember. "We're going to finish the project," he said, "and it's going to be great. And whatever happens after that, we'll figure it out." "You sound very confident for someone whose career is on the line." "Maybe I'm just too tired to panic properly." She laughed, quiet, genuine. "That's fair." They talked for another 20 minutes. About nothing important. About the office, about weekend plans, about a documentary Victoria had watched about space exploration. Normal conversation, the kind people had when they were just people, not boss and employee, not the subject of office gossip. It felt good. Dangerous, but good. When they finally said goodnight, Ethan sat in the dark living room for a while, phone still in his hand, trying to sort through the tangle of feelings in his chest. He liked Victoria. Not just respected her or admired her work, actually liked her. Liked the way she laughed at unexpected moments. Liked the way she remembered small details. Liked the way she looked at problems like puzzles to be solved instead of obstacles to fear. And that was a problem, because liking your boss, really liking them, was a recipe for disaster. He should pull back, create distance, focus on the work and nothing else. That was the smart thing to do. But Ethan had spent 5 years being smart, being careful, making the safe choice every time. And look where it had gotten him. Alone in a dark apartment, too scared to want anything beyond the next day's responsibilities. Maybe it was time to stop being so smart. The thought terrified him, but it also felt like something close to freedom. The final 2 weeks of the project were brutal. Long hours, constant pressure, a million small crises that needed solving. But the team pulled together, and slowly, impossibly, the system started working, really working. The data migrated cleanly, the edge cases were handled, the interface was clean and intuitive. It wasn't just functional, it was good. On the night before the board presentation, Victoria called everyone into the main conference room. The full project team, 20 people who'd been working themselves ragged for 6 weeks, all gathered around the table looking exhausted and anxious. Victoria stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, and for a moment she just looked at them. Then she smiled. Not the polished CEO smile, but something real. "We did it," she said simply. "I know there were moments when it felt impossible. I know the last 6 weeks have been hell, but you all showed up, did the work, and built something we can be proud of." She paused. "Tomorrow, I'm going to walk into that boardroom and show them what this team is capable of. And when they ask who made it happen, I'm going to tell them the truth. You did. All of you." The room was quiet. Then Marcus started clapping, and suddenly everyone was applauding, the tension breaking into something that felt like relief. Victoria caught Ethan's eye across the table. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. The look said everything. "We made it." He nodded back. Yeah, they had. The board presentation went perfectly. Victoria walked them through the system, demonstrated the features, showed the metrics. The board asked tough questions, and she answered every single one with the calm authority that made her who she was. When it was over, the chairman actually smiled, a rare occurrence, and said the company was lucky to have her. The celebration afterward was subdued. A team lunch, congratulations passed around, promises to take some time off. Ethan slipped out early, exhausted beyond words, and went home to pick up Lily from school. That night, his phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Thank you for everything. Couldn't have done this without you." He typed back, "Same. It was an honor working with you." What he wanted to say was more complicated. That the last 6 weeks had meant something to him beyond the project, beyond the code. That working with her had reminded him what it felt like to be part of something bigger than himself. But those words felt too big, too dangerous to send over text. So he left it at that and tried to convince himself it was enough. The week after the board presentation should have brought relief. The project was done, the pressure was off, and the company had moved on to the next crisis. But instead of easing, the tension between Ethan and Victoria crystallized into something harder to ignore. They still worked together. Meetings, emails, the occasional project check-in, but there was a new carefulness to their interactions, a distance that felt deliberate. Victoria stopped staying late. Ethan left the office at exactly 5:30 every day. They were polite, professional, exactly what coworkers should be. It felt like lying. Marcus noticed first. "Things weird between you and the boss?" Ethan didn't look up from his screen. "No. Why?" "I don't know. You two were practically attached during the project. Now you barely talk." "We talk." "Yeah, but like, different." Marcus leaned against the cubicle wall. "Did something happen?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "We finished the project. That's it." Marcus raised his hands. Okay, just asking." But he wasn't the only one asking. The whole office seemed to be watching, waiting for something to happen. The rumors had quieted after the successful board presentation. Hard to claim favoritism when the results spoke for themselves. But they hadn't disappeared. They'd just gone underground, waiting. Ethan tried not to care, tried to focus on his work, on Lily, on the normal rhythm of his life. But normal felt wrong now, like he'd spent 6 weeks living at a different altitude and his body hadn't adjusted back to ground level. He missed her. That was the truth he kept trying to ignore. He missed working with Victoria, missed the late-night conversations, missed the way she'd look at a problem and immediately see the solution he'd been circling around for hours. He missed feeling like he was part of something important, something bigger than debugging code and attending status meetings. On Thursday afternoon, his phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Can you come to my office? Need to discuss something." His stomach dropped. This was it. The conversation where she'd tell him they needed more distance, that they couldn't work together anymore, that one of them should transfer to a different team. He'd been expecting it, dreading it, and now it was here. He saved his work, stood up, walked to her office with legs that felt too heavy. Her door was open. She was standing by the window looking out at the city and didn't turn when he knocked. "Close the door," she said quietly. He did. The click of the latch sounded too loud. Victoria turned to face him. She looked tired, worn in a way that had nothing to do with work. "I got a call from HR this morning." Ethan's chest tightened. "About?" "Someone filed a formal complaint, anonymous, claiming I've been showing you preferential treatment, that our relationship is inappropriate, that it's creating a hostile work environment for other employees." The words hit like cold water. "That's insane." "Is it?" Victoria crossed her arms. "We spent 6 weeks working together constantly. We had drinks at my apartment. We text outside of work hours. From the outside, it probably does look inappropriate. But we haven't done anything wrong. Haven't we?" She looked at him directly, and there was something raw in her expression. "Ethan, be honest. If nothing's happened between us, why does it feel like something has?" He didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, he had one, but saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. Victoria continued, her voice quieter. "HR is launching an investigation. They'll interview people, review communications, look at my decisions regarding your role on the project. They want to make sure everything was above board." It was. "I know that. You know that. But proving it is going to be difficult, especially when half the office is already convinced we're involved." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. "What do we do?" "We cooperate. Answer their questions honestly. Show them there's nothing to hide." She paused. "And we maintain distance until it's resolved. No private meetings, no after-hours communication, nothing that could be misinterpreted." "For how long?" "However long it takes." Victoria looked away. "Could be weeks, could be months." The thought of months of this careful distance, this forced professionalism, felt unbearable. But Ethan nodded because what else could he do? "Okay?" "I'm sorry," Victoria said, and she sounded it. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful. Should have anticipated how it would look." "Stop apologizing for being a human being. I'm not just a human being. I'm the CEO. I have responsibilities, and I have agency." Ethan stepped closer, surprising himself. "I'm not some victim here, Victoria. I chose to work with you. I chose to stay late, to take your calls, to—" He stopped, caught himself before he said too much. "To what?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "To care about you," he thought. "To start looking forward to seeing you every day. To imagine what it might be like if circumstances were different. To be your friend," he said instead. "If that's allowed." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Pain, maybe, or longing. "I don't know if it is. I don't know what the rules are anymore." "Then maybe we need to stop following rules that don't make sense." "Ethan," she said his name like a warning. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." He should have backed off, should have nodded and left and maintained the professional distance she was asking for. But standing there, looking at her trying so hard to hold everything together, he couldn't do it. "What if I don't want it to be easy?" he asked. Victoria stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for 6 weeks, working with you was the best part of my day. I'm saying that I miss it, miss you. And I don't think I'm the only one feeling that way." It doesn't matter what we feel. Why not? Why doesn't it matter? Because I'm your boss. The words came out sharp, frustrated. Because there are rules and expectations and power dynamics that make this impossible. Because even if... She stopped herself, turned back to the window. It doesn't matter. We can't. Ethan watched her rigid posture, the way her hands were clenched at her sides. Did HR tell you that you couldn't see me, like personally? No, but then this is you deciding. You're the one putting up walls. Victoria whirled around. Because someone has to. Because if I don't, if I let myself... She broke off, breathing hard. Do you have any idea what I could lose? Not just my job, my reputation, the company I built, everything. I know. And he did. Understood the stakes, understood why she was scared. I'm not asking you to risk everything. I'm just asking you to be honest about what this is. What is it, Ethan? Tell me. Because from where I'm standing, it's a mess. It's complicated and impossible, and there's no version of this that ends well. Maybe not, but at least it would be real. The words hung between them. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head. I can't do this right now. The investigation, the board, everything. I can't. Okay. He stepped back, gave her space. But when you can, when you're ready to admit that something exists here, I'll still be here. You shouldn't wait for me. I'm not asking for permission. He left before she could respond, walked out of her office and back to his desk with his heart pounding. He'd said too much, pushed too hard, crossed a line he couldn't uncross. But he didn't regret it, because it was true. All of it. The HR investigation started the following week. Ethan was called in for an interview, a small conference room, 2 HR representatives, questions about his working relationship with Victoria, about the project, about any inappropriate behavior or favoritism. He answered honestly, methodically, showed them his work logs and project contributions, made it clear that everything he'd accomplished had been earned. Did Ms. Hale ever make you feel uncomfortable? One of them asked. No, never. Did she ever suggest a personal relationship outside of work? We had dinner once, during a storm. She helped arrange care for my daughter when I was stuck in traffic. That's it. They wrote everything down, thanked him for his time. He walked out feeling wrung dry, exposed, like they'd taken something private and turned it into evidence. Marcus caught him in the hallway. How'd it go? Fine, standard questions. They got me yesterday. Asked a bunch of stuff about you and Victoria. Marcus looked uncomfortable. I told them the truth, that you worked your ass off on that project, that anyone saying otherwise is full of it. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Thanks, man. Yeah, well, you've been here longer than me, always helped when I needed it. Figured I owed you. Marcus hesitated. For what it's worth, I don't think you did anything wrong. I think people are just jealous because you're good at your job and she noticed. It was a small thing, that support, but it mattered more than Marcus probably realized. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan watched as the investigation unfolded around him. More interviews, more questions, the uncomfortable awareness that people were talking about him in rooms he wasn't in. Victoria kept her distance, passed him in hallways without stopping, sent emails instead of calling, attended different meetings. The careful professionalism felt like armor they were both wearing. He hated it. Lily noticed something was wrong. You're sad, she announced one night over chicken nuggets. I'm not sad, sweetheart. You are. You have your sad face. She scrunched up her own face in demonstration. Like this. Ethan couldn't help but smile. That's not my sad face. It is. Is it because of work? Work's fine. Is it because of your boss? The fancy lady? He'd stopped correcting her about Victoria. It felt pointless when she was right more often than not. It's complicated, Lil. Do you like her? The question, asked so simply by a 5-year-old, hit harder than any HR interview. Yeah, I do. Then why don't you tell her? Because sometimes liking someone isn't enough. Sometimes there are rules and reasons why things can't work. Lily considered this, swinging her legs under the table. That's dumb. Yeah, Ethan agreed quietly. It kind of is. That weekend, he took Lily to the park, let her play on the swings while he sat on a bench and tried not to think about Victoria. tried not to wonder what she was doing, whether she was okay, whether she was thinking about him too. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It's Victoria. I got a new phone. Needed something not connected to work. Can we talk? His heart jumped. He glanced at Lily, still swinging, still safe, and typed back, "When? Tonight? I can come to you if that's easier." The idea of Victoria coming to his apartment, entering his actual life instead of the carefully compartmentalized work version, felt momentous. "Okay, 8:30, after Lily's asleep. I'll be there." He spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, half present for Lily's playground adventures. When they got home, he fed her dinner, gave her a bath, read the usual 3 bedtime stories. She fell asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, and Ethan stood in her doorway for a minute, trying to steady his breathing. Victoria knocked at exactly 8:30. He opened the door, and there she was, jeans, a sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked younger like this, less like a CEO, and more like someone who could be his friend, or something more than friends. "Hi," she said. "Hi, come in." She stepped inside, looked around his small apartment with open curiosity. The books stacked on shelves, Lily's artwork taped to the fridge, the blanket fort still set up in the living room corner. "You have a nice place." "It's small. It's lived in. That's better." She turned to face him. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I know we're supposed to be maintaining distance. That's a work rule. This isn't work." "No, it's not." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. "I needed to apologize for what I said in my office about you making things harder. That wasn't fair. You don't owe me an apology." "I do. Because you were right. I've been hiding behind rules and responsibilities, pretending that following them makes me noble instead of just scared." She looked at him directly. "I am scared, Ethan. Terrified, actually, of losing everything I've built, of people thinking I'm weak or compromised, of wanting something I shouldn't want." "What do you want?" His voice came out rough. Victoria took a breath. "I want to stop pretending that working with you didn't change things for me. I want to stop acting like I don't look forward to your emails or think about our conversations after they're over. I want—" She paused, searching for words. "I want to know what happens if we stop fighting this." Ethan closed the distance between them. Not touching, but close enough that he could see the pulse at her throat, the uncertainty in her eyes. "What about the investigation?" "They finished it yesterday. Found no evidence of wrongdoing. My decisions were all justified by your performance. The complaint was dismissed." Relief flooded through him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to figure out what I wanted first, without the investigation hanging over us, without the immediate pressure." Victoria looked up at him. "And what I want is to stop running from this, whatever this is." "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, we can't go back." "I know, and that's terrifying. But spending the last 3 weeks pretending you don't matter to me has been worse." Her voice dropped. "So I'm here, in your apartment, probably breaking a dozen unspoken rules, hoping you haven't changed your mind." Ethan reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle, deliberate. "I haven't changed my mind." "Good." She leaned into his hand slightly. "Because I don't have a plan for this. I don't know how we make it work or what it looks like. I just know I don't want to keep pretending." "Then we stop pretending." He kissed her, softly at first, giving her room to pull back, to change her mind. But Victoria didn't pull back. She leaned in, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and kissed him back with a kind of desperate relief. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed quietly. "That was, yeah. We're going to have to be careful. The office can't know, not yet." "I know. And I need to talk to HR about relationship disclosure policies. Make sure everything's documented properly." "Victoria," he smiled, "stop thinking like a CEO for 5 minutes. I don't know if I can." "Try." So she did. They moved to the couch, sat close together, and just talked. About everything and nothing. About Lily, about Victoria's childhood, about the strange reality of trying to build something real in the middle of complicated circumstances. Victoria told him about the pressure of running a company, about the loneliness that came with success, about how she'd convinced herself that personal happiness was a luxury she couldn't afford. I kept thinking there would be time later, she said. After the next milestone, after the next funding round, after the company was stable. But there's always something else. Always another crisis or opportunity or reason to wait. So stop waiting. Is it really that simple? Probably not. Ethan took her hand, threaded their fingers together. But maybe it could be. They stayed like that for hours, talking and kissing and slowly learning each other outside of conference rooms and deadlines. When Victoria finally left, reluctantly, at almost midnight, Ethan stood in his doorway and watched her walk to her car, something warm and terrifying settling in his chest. This was real. They were doing this, and there was no going back. The next few weeks were strange, conducting a relationship in secret. They were careful at work, professional, distant, nothing that would raise suspicion. But outside the office, they found stolen moments. Coffee on Saturday mornings while Lily was at activities. Quiet dinners at Victoria's apartment. Long phone calls after Lily fell asleep. Ethan had forgotten what it felt like to date someone, to anticipate seeing them, to learn their preferences and quirks. Victoria liked her coffee with too much sugar. She fell asleep during movies but would never admit it. She had a terrible sense of direction and refused to use GPS out of stubbornness. She was brilliant and driven and surprisingly funny when she let her guard down. She was also scared. Ethan could see it in the way she'd sometimes pull back in the middle of a conversation, remind him about the risks, worry out loud about what would happen if people found out. He understood the fear, shared it even, but he was tired of letting fear make decisions. "What if we just told them?" he asked one night. They were at her apartment, cooking dinner together, or rather, Victoria was cooking while Ethan chopped vegetables and tried not to cut himself. "Told who?" "Everyone. The office, your board. Get ahead of it instead of waiting for someone to figure it out." Victoria stopped stirring the sauce. "That's a terrible idea." "Why?" "Because the last investigation barely cleared us. If we announce a relationship now, it looks like we were lying before." We weren't lying. Nothing had happened yet. "People won't see it that way." She turned to face him. "They'll assume we were involved during the project, that everything we said was a cover-up. It'll be worse." "So we just keep hiding forever?" "Not forever, just until—" She trailed off. "Until when? Until it's convenient? Until you're sure it won't hurt your reputation?" The words came out harsher than he intended. "I'm not ashamed of this, Victoria. Of us. And I don't want to pretend I am. I'm not ashamed either, but I have responsibilities. I know. The company, the board, the shareholders. I get it. But what about responsibility to yourself? To being happy?" Victoria set down the spoon, frustration crossing her face. "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who will be accused of sleeping your way through personnel decisions. You're not the one whose authority will be questioned every time you make a call that benefits someone you're involved with." "You're right. I'm not." Ethan set down the knife, suddenly exhausted. "But I'm also not willing to spend months sneaking around like we're doing something wrong. I spent 5 years of my life in a relationship where I had to hide parts of myself, where I wasn't enough exactly as I was. I'm not doing that again." The words landed between them, heavy with history Victoria didn't fully know. She looked at him for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer. "Tell me about your ex-wife." Ethan hadn't planned to have this conversation tonight, hadn't really talked about Sarah to anyone in years, but Victoria was looking at him with genuine concern, and somehow the words came. "We got married young. Too young, probably. She was ambitious, driven, wanted this big, successful life. And I don't know. I wanted stability, family, different things." He picked up the knife again, needed something to do with his hands. "When Lily was born, I thought it would bring us together, but it just highlighted how different we were. Sarah kept working longer hours, traveling more. I took on more childcare. She resented me for being content with less. I resented her for never being home." "What happened?" "She met someone else, someone more like her, successful, ambitious, always moving. She left when Lily was 2, filed for divorce, moved across the country, sent support checks every month like that made up for not being present." He finished chopping the vegetables, set them aside. "She's remarried now, has a kid with her new husband, barely sees Lily except for scheduled visits twice a year." Victoria was quiet. Then she moved closer, wrapped her arms around him from behind. I'm sorry. It's fine. It was years ago. It's not fine. She should have stayed, should have fought for you both. Ethan turned in her arms, looked down at her. The point is, I know what it's like to be with someone who's ashamed of the life I want. Someone who thinks stability and family are settling instead of choosing. And I can't do that again, Victoria. Even for you. I'm not ashamed of you. Her voice was fierce. Not for a second. Then stop acting like you are. I'm trying to protect us both. By hiding? That's not protection. That's fear. He cupped her face in his hands. I get it. I'm scared too. But I'd rather take the risk and fail than never try at all. Victoria closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's probably going to be messy and complicated, and people are going to judge us. But at least it'll be honest. She opened her eyes, looked at him with something that might have been hope. What if it costs me everything? What if it doesn't? What if people surprise us? I've been running this company for 8 years. People don't surprise me. Not usually. Maybe it's time they did. They finished cooking dinner in silence, both processing. But later, curled up on the couch, with bad television playing in the background, Victoria spoke quietly. If we do this, if we go public, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. More scrutiny, more gossip, more people questioning your competence. It won't be easy. I know. And I can't promise I'll be good at it. The relationship part. I work too much. I'm terrible at asking for help. I overthink everything. I work too much too. I have a 5-year-old who will always come first. I'm not exactly a prize here. Victoria turned to look at him. You're wrong about that. Something in her voice made his chest tight. Yeah? Yeah. She kissed him softly. You're kind and patient, and you show up for the people you care about. You're a good father. You're brilliant at your job even if you don't brag about it. And you make me want to be braver than I am. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just kissed her back and held her closer and tried to believe that maybe, against all odds, this could actually work. The decision to tell people came gradually, not as one dramatic moment, but as a series of small choices. First, Victoria submitted relationship disclosure forms to HR, officially documenting that they were involved and implementing safeguards against conflicts of interest. Then she told her assistant, who looked completely unsurprised and simply said she'd adjust Victoria's schedule accordingly. Then the board chair, who raised an eyebrow but admitted that as long as everything was properly documented, it was Victoria's personal business. Each conversation was terrifying, and each one went better than expected. Maybe people aren't as judgmental as you thought, Ethan suggested after Victoria reported that the board chair had basically shrugged and moved on. Or maybe they're just relieved I finally have a personal life. Apparently I was getting insufferable with the workaholic routine. You're never insufferable. You haven't seen me during budget season. Looking forward to it. She laughed, the sound lighter than he'd heard in weeks. You're ridiculous. You like it? Unfortunately, yes. The office found out not through any official announcement, but through the grapevine, the way these things always spread. Someone saw them having coffee together off-site. Someone else noticed Victoria's new ring, a simple band Ethan had given her, nothing fancy, just a promise that this was real. Marcus cornered Ethan in the break room with a knowing grin. So, you and the boss? Ethan didn't deny it. Yeah, called it, like months ago. Everyone called it. True, but I called it first. Marcus grabbed a coffee, looking genuinely happy. Good for you, man. She's intense, but she's solid. And you've been less depressed lately. It's nice to see. I wasn't depressed. You were absolutely depressed. Single dad, working too hard, no life outside of code and daycare pickup. Now I don't know, you smile more. Ethan hadn't noticed that. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe having something to look forward to, someone to share the weight with, made a difference. The whispers started up again, of course. New versions of the old rumors, speculation about how long they'd really been together, whether Victoria had shown favoritism during the project. But this time, Ethan didn't care as much. Let them talk. He knew the truth. Victoria knew the truth. And their work would prove the rest. 3 weeks after they went semi-public, Victoria asked to meet Lily. "Only if you think she's ready," she added quickly. "I know that's a big step." Ethan had been thinking about it for days. Lily knew he was seeing someone. He'd mentioned a friend in vague terms, but he hadn't pushed details. Didn't want to confuse her or make promises he couldn't keep. But Victoria wasn't going anywhere, that much he knew. "She'll love you," he said. "Fair warning, though, she's going to ask you 1,000 questions and probably try to show you every toy she owns. I can handle that. And if she doesn't like you, then we'll figure it out." Victoria squeezed his hand. "I'm not expecting her to think I'm great immediately. I just want to meet her, be part of your actual life, not just the work version." They met at the park on Saturday morning. Ethan watched Lily charge across the playground toward them, pigtails flying, and felt his heart lodge in his throat. This was it, the moment where two parts of his life collided. Lily skidded to a stop in front of Victoria, assessing. "You're the fancy lady." Victoria smiled. "I guess I am." "You're Lily. How do you know my name?" "Your dad talks about you. A lot." "What does he say?" "That you're smart and funny and stubborn, that you like dinosaurs and hate broccoli." Lily brightened. "Broccoli is gross." "Agreed. Do you want to see me on the monkey bars?" "Absolutely." And just like that, Lily accepted her. Dragged Victoria around the playground, showed off every trick she'd learned, peppered her with questions about everything from whether she liked unicorns to what kind of car she drove. Victoria answered patiently, engaged fully, and Ethan watched from a bench with something that felt dangerously close to hope. After an hour, Lily crashed, the way 5-year-olds did, and demanded ice cream. They walked to the nearby shop, Lily between them, chattering about kindergarten drama. Victoria caught Ethan's eye over Lily's head and smiled, and something settled in his chest. This could work. This strange, complicated configuration of lives could actually work. Later, after Lily was home and in bed, Victoria called. "She's wonderful. She liked you. I liked her too. Thank you for trusting me with that. Thank you for not running when she asked if you'd ever seen a T-Rex skeleton." Victoria laughed. "She's very serious about her dinosaurs." "She is." They talked for another hour, comfortable and easy, and when they finally hung up, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling with a stupid smile on his face. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he was allowing himself to want something beyond survival and responsibility. He was allowing himself to imagine a future that included someone else. The reality of being together, of actually building something instead of just wanting it, turned out to be more complicated than either of them had anticipated. Not because they didn't work well together. They did, maybe too well, but because merging two lives that had been carefully constructed around independence was messy. Victoria had spent 8 years building walls around herself, creating a life where work came first and everything else was secondary. Ethan had spent 5 years being entirely responsible for another human being, organizing every hour around Lily's needs and schedules. Finding space for each other required dismantling routines that had felt permanent. The first real fight happened 3 weeks after Victoria met Lily. They'd planned dinner at Victoria's apartment, a quiet evening, just the two of them. A chance to pretend they were a normal couple instead of navigating the minefield of office politics and single parenthood. But at 4:30, the daycare called. Lily had a fever, needed to be picked up immediately. Ethan texted Victoria from the parking lot. "Have to cancel. Lily's sick. I'm sorry." Her response came quickly. "Don't apologize. Take care of her. Rain check?" "Yeah, I'll make it up to you." Except 3 days later, Lily was still sick, one of those endless kindergarten viruses that refused to quit. Ethan worked from home, juggling code reviews and conference calls while administering medicine and reading picture books. Victoria sent care packages through a delivery service, soup, children's medicine, a stuffed dinosaur for Lily. Thoughtful gifts that made Ethan's chest ache with gratitude. But when Lily finally recovered and they tried to reschedule, Victoria had a board crisis. Emergency meeting that stretched into the weekend. Then Ethan had a project deadline. Then Lily had a school event he couldn't miss. 2 weeks passed with nothing but texts and one stolen lunch hour where they both looked exhausted. "This isn't working," Victoria said, pushing her salad around without eating. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What isn't?" "This. Us trying to find time. There's always something else, someone who needs us more." She set down her fork. I knew it would be hard, but I didn't expect it to be this hard. Are you saying you want to stop? No. I'm saying I don't know how to do this. How to be present for you when my company needs me. How to not feel guilty every time I have to cancel because of work. You think I don't feel the same way? Every time Lily's sick or has a thing at school, I'm choosing her over you. That's how it has to be. I know, and I respect that, but Victoria looked at him with something close to desperation. I don't know where I fit. In your life, with Lily, with everything. I feel like I'm always going to be the thing you squeeze in around the edges. The words stung because they had truth in them. Ethan's life was carefully calibrated around Lily's needs, and Victoria was right. She was fitting into the spaces left over. But wasn't that how it had to be? Lily was 5 years old. She came first. That wasn't negotiable. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe I'm just... She stopped, shook her head. Sorry, I'm being unfair. You have a daughter. That's your priority. It should be. But you need to be a priority too. Do I? Victoria met his eyes. Because sometimes I wonder if this is just another thing you're managing, like daycare pickup and project deadlines. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time we had a full evening together? When's the last time you weren't checking your phone for messages from Lily's school? Ethan wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. His attention was always divided, part of him perpetually waiting for the next crisis, the next need that would pull him away. That was what single parenthood was. That was what he'd signed up for when Sarah left. I can't change that I have a daughter, he said finally. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up, gathered her things. I don't know, maybe I'm asking for something that doesn't exist, time that we don't have, attention you can't give. She looked at him with exhausted eyes. I'm sorry, I need to get back to the office. She left before he could respond, and Ethan sat alone in the restaurant, lunch barely touched, feeling like he'd just failed a test he didn't know he was taking. That night, after Lily was asleep, he sat on his couch and stared at his phone. He should call Victoria, apologize, try to fix whatever had just broken between them. But he didn't know how to fix the fundamental problem. He had obligations she didn't, responsibilities that would always come first, and no amount of wanting her was going to change that. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. I'm sorry about lunch. That wasn't fair to you. He typed back, You weren't wrong, though. I was frustrated, taking it out on you when the real problem is me trying to figure out how to be in a relationship after convincing myself I didn't need one. Do you need one? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, I need you. I just don't know how to do it right. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure it out together. I'd like that. They talked on the phone for an hour after that, both of them apologizing, trying to find a way forward. They agreed to be more intentional about scheduling time, to communicate better about conflicts, to stop expecting perfection from something that was inherently messy. It helped, but the fundamental tension remained. Victoria's work demanded irregular hours and constant availability. Lily's needs were unpredictable and non-negotiable. Finding the overlap was like trying to solve an equation with variables that kept changing. The solution, when it came, was proposed by Lily. She'd been drawing at the kitchen table while Ethan made dinner, humming to herself, when she suddenly looked up. Is Victoria your girlfriend? Ethan almost dropped the knife. What? Emma's mom has a boyfriend. He comes over for dinner sometimes. Is Victoria like that? He sat down at the table, trying to find words a 5-year-old would understand. Yeah, kind of. I like spending time with her. Does she like spending time with us? I think so. Why? Lily went back to her drawing. Because she should come here more. Then you wouldn't be sad about not seeing her. Out of the mouths of children. Ethan stared at his daughter, marveling at the simple logic. Why were they trying to carve out separate time when they could just blend their lives together? Victoria could come to his apartment, be part of the evening routine, exist in his real world instead of the carefully scheduled version. He texted her that night. What if we stopped trying to find perfect time and just settled for real time? Dinner here tomorrow? Fair warning, it's fish sticks and homework hour. Victoria's response. I'll bring wine. She showed up the next evening in jeans and a sweater, carrying a bottle of wine and looking nervous. Lily launched herself at Victoria's legs, chattering about a project at school. Ethan watched Victoria navigate the chaos, helping Lily with her homework, setting the table, asking questions about dinosaur facts, and felt something settle in his chest. This was better. Messier, but better. Real. They fell into a rhythm after that. Victoria would come over twice a week, usually after work, and they'd have dinner together. Sometimes they'd watch a movie after Lily went to bed. Sometimes they'd just sit on the couch and talk about their days. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, no candlelit dinners or weekend getaways, but it felt more real than anything Ethan had experienced before. Victoria started keeping clothes at his apartment, a toothbrush in the bathroom. Coffee she preferred in the cabinet, small markers of presence that suggested permanence. The office noticed, of course. They always noticed. But the gossip had changed texture. Less scandalous speculation, more knowing acceptance. People had adjusted to the reality that their CEO was dating someone, that it was documented and official and not actually that interesting once it became normal. Marcus congratulated Ethan in the break room. "You two seem good together, like actually functional." "Thanks, I think?" "No, I mean it. I've seen Victoria at company events with other people she's dated. She always looks like she's performing. With you, she looks relaxed, human." Ethan hadn't thought about it that way, hadn't considered that Victoria might have had relationships before that felt more like obligations than choices. "How many people has she dated, that you know of?" Marcus shrugged. "A few. Nobody serious. Usually ended after a couple months because she worked too much or they couldn't handle the scrutiny. You're the first one who's lasted." "We've only been together a few months." "Yeah, but you've been around longer than that. The storm thing was like 6 months ago. You've been in her orbit for a while." It was strange to think about it that way, that they'd been building toward this for months before either of them acknowledged it, that all those late nights and project meetings and careful conversations had been the foundation for something neither of them had planned. The next challenge came from an unexpected direction. Ethan's ex-wife called on a Tuesday evening just as they were sitting down to dinner. He almost didn't answer, but Sarah rarely called without reason. "I need to talk to you about summer," she said without preamble. Ethan stepped into his bedroom, closing the door. "What about it?" "I want Lily to come stay with us for 6 weeks. David and I are taking the kids to Europe, and I want her to be part of it." 6 weeks? Sarah, that's half the summer. "I know, but she barely knows her half-brother, and this would be good for them. Good for all of us." Ethan's chest tightened. "She's 5. That's a long time to be away from home." "She'll be with her mother. That's not away from home." The implication stung. "You see her twice a year. I don't think you get to define what home means for her." "That's not fair. I've tried to be more involved. By sending support checks? By calling once a month?" Ethan caught himself, lowered his voice. "Look, if you want to see her more, we can work something out. But 6 weeks is too long." "I have rights, Ethan." "So do I. Primary custody, remember?" They argued for another 20 minutes, neither budging. Finally, Sarah said she'd have her lawyer contact him and hung up. Ethan stood in his bedroom, phone in hand, feeling the old familiar anger rise up. Sarah had left. Had chosen her career and her new family over the one she'd started. And now she wanted to swoop in and play mother for 6 weeks like that erased 5 years of absence. When he came back to the kitchen, Victoria and Lily were doing dishes together, Lily standing on a stool and narrating a story about a soap bubble kingdom. Victoria looked up when he entered, and whatever she saw in his face made her expression shift to concern. "Everything okay?" "Fine. Just ex-wife stuff." Lily turned around. "Was that Mommy on the phone?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "Does she want to talk to me?" The hopeful note in Lily's voice broke something in Ethan's chest. "Next time, okay?" She had to go. Lily accepted this with the resilience of a kid who'd learned not to expect too much. She went back to the dishes, and Ethan met Victoria's eyes across the kitchen. She mouthed, "Later?" He nodded. After Lily was in bed, they sat on the couch and Ethan explained the situation. Victoria listened without interrupting, her hand in his, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Tell her no. Keep Lily here where she's stable and safe. But I don't want to be the parent who keeps her from her mother, even if her mother hasn't earned that relationship. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. I don't know, maybe I'm being selfish. You're being protective. There's a difference. Is there, or am I just scared of losing her? Victoria shifted closer, wrapped her arms around him. You're allowed to be scared. That doesn't make you selfish. It makes you a parent who cares. What would you do? I don't know. I'm not a parent. She paused. But I think you need to talk to Lily. See what she wants. She's 5. She's also smart, and she deserves to have a say in something this big. Ethan hadn't considered that, had been so focused on protecting Lily that he hadn't thought about asking her what she actually wanted. You think she'd tell me the truth? I think she tells you the truth about everything else. Why would this be different? So the next evening, after dinner, Ethan sat with Lily on her bed and asked the question he'd been dreading. Mommy wants you to come visit this summer, for a while, to go to Europe with her and David and your brother. Lily's eyes went wide. Really? Yeah. Would you want to do that? She thought about it, her face serious. How long? 6 weeks. That's a really long time. It is. Would you come? No, sweetheart. Just you and Mommy's family. Lily picked at her stuffed rabbit's ear. Would I miss my birthday? Ethan checked the dates in his head. Yeah, you would. Oh. She looked genuinely disappointed. I wanted to have a party with dinosaurs and invite Emma and Victoria. We could do the party before you go. But it wouldn't be on my real birthday. Lily looked at him with those eyes that were too old for 5. Do I have to go? No. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Will Mommy be sad if I say no? And there it was, the impossible position of a child trying to manage adult emotions. Ethan pulled Lily onto his lap, held her close. Mommy will understand, and if she's sad, that's okay. Sad doesn't mean wrong. I don't want to make her sad, but I don't want to go for 6 weeks. Lily buried her face in his shirt. Is that bad? No, baby, that's not bad. That's honest. They sat like that for a while. Lily curled up against him, both of them processing. Eventually, she pulled back and looked at him. Could I go for 2 weeks? That's what Emma did when she visited her grandma. 2 weeks. That was reasonable. That was something Ethan could live with. I think we could do 2 weeks. Okay. Can we call Mommy and tell her? Sure. The call with Sarah went about as well as expected. She argued, accused him of manipulating Lily, threatened legal action. But eventually, faced with the reality that Lily herself wanted a shorter visit, she agreed to 2 weeks. The conversation ended stiffly, with promises to work out details later. When Ethan emerged from his bedroom, Victoria was reading on the couch. She looked up. How'd it go? 2 weeks? Compromise. That's good? Yeah. He sat down next to her, suddenly exhausted. I hate this. Negotiating time with my own daughter like she's a commodity. You're doing the best you can with an impossible situation. That's all anyone can do. Is it enough? Victoria set down her book, turned to face him fully. Ethan, you're an amazing father. Lily is happy, confident, loved. She knows she comes first with you. That's more than a lot of kids get. But she still wants her mother. Still hopes every time Sarah calls that it'll be different. Of course she does. That's normal. But you can't protect her from disappointment. You can only be there when it happens. The words settled over him, true and uncomfortable. He'd spent 5 years trying to shield Lily from the reality of Sarah's absence, trying to fill both roles, trying to be enough. But he couldn't control Sarah's choices, couldn't make her be the mother Lily deserved. All he could do was show up, every day, consistently. Victoria seemed to understand where his thoughts had gone. She took his hand, squeezed. You're doing enough, I promise. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that his imperfect, exhausted attempts at parenting were adequate, but the doubt lingered, persistent and familiar. The summer plans took shape over the following weeks. 2 weeks with Sarah in July. The rest of the time, Lily would stay with Ethan, and they'd figure out their own adventures. Victoria offered her lake house for a long weekend, A quiet place upstate where Lily could swim and explore. Are you sure? Ethan asked when she first mentioned it. That's a lot to take on. A 5-year-old at your house for 3 days. I'm sure. Besides, I have that house and never use it. It seems like a waste to let it sit empty when Lily would love it. They went in August, after Lily's visit with Sarah. The 2 weeks apart had been harder than Ethan expected. Phone calls every night, Lily's voice small and far away, his apartment feeling too quiet. When he picked her up at the airport, she ran to him and cried, clinging to his neck like she'd never let go. Did you have fun? He asked once she'd calmed down. It was okay. The buildings were pretty, but I missed you and Victoria and my room. Sarah, standing nearby with her new family, looked hurt, but she didn't argue, just hugged Lily goodbye and reminded her to email the photos they'd taken. The drive to Victoria's lake house took 3 hours. Lily dozed in the back seat for part of it, exhausted from travel. Victoria navigated, playlist on low, and Ethan found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. The house was beautiful, all windows and wood, perched on the edge of a private lake. Lily's eyes went huge when she saw it. You live here? Sometimes, Victoria said. Not as often as I should. They spent the weekend swimming, hiking easy trails, cooking meals together. Lily collected rocks and sticks, built elaborate fairy houses near the water's edge. Victoria taught her how to skip stones, patient through dozens of failed attempts, until Lily finally got one to bounce twice. On the last evening, they made s'mores over a fire pit. Lily, sticky with marshmallow and chocolate, announced that this was the best vacation ever. Then she looked at Victoria seriously. Are you going to marry my dad? Ethan choked on his s'more. Lily. What? Emma's mom said you probably would, because you're together a lot and you smile at each other. Victoria, to her credit, didn't panic. She just looked at Lily thoughtfully. Would that be okay with you, if I did? Lily considered this. Would you live with us? Probably, eventually. Would you still be my dad's boss? At work? Yes, but at home we'd be a family. Okay. Lily took another bite of s'more. Then it's okay, but I get to help plan the wedding, and there have to be dinosaurs. Victoria laughed. Deal. Later, after Lily was asleep in the guest room, Ethan and Victoria sat on the deck overlooking the lake. The night was clear, stars visible in a way they never were in the city. I'm sorry about that, Ethan said. The marriage question, she shouldn't have. Why not? It's a reasonable thing to wonder about. We've only been together a few months. We've known each other longer than that. Victoria turned to look at him. And I meant what I said about the family thing. I know it's fast and I know it's complicated, but I'm in this. Fully. Ethan's throat tightened. Are you sure? Because being with me means being with Lily and dealing with Sarah and negotiating schedules and never having plans that are just about us. I know. And you're still in? I'm still in. She took his hand. I'm not good at this. At relationships, at parenting, at any of it. But I want to learn. With you. He kissed her then, soft and grateful. You're better at it than you think. Lily makes it easy. She's a good kid. She likes you. A lot. The feeling's mutual. Victoria leaned against him. I never thought I wanted this. A family, stability. It always seemed like giving up somehow. Like settling for less than I was capable of. And now? Now I think I had it backwards. That maybe the brave thing isn't chasing the next achievement. Maybe it's choosing to build something with someone, even when it's messy and hard. They sat like that for a long time, watching the water, both of them processing what they'd stumbled into. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't simple, but it was theirs. The drive back to the city on Sunday evening was quiet. Lily slept the whole way, exhausted from sun and swimming. Victoria drove while Ethan dozed in the passenger seat, and when they finally pulled up to his apartment building, the sky was turning purple with dusk. Thank you, Ethan said as they unloaded the car. For the weekend, for everything. Stop thanking me. I wanted to do it. I know, but still. Victoria kissed him, Lily still asleep in his arms. Same time next month? You're serious? About the lake house? Yes. About us? Also, yes. she smiled. Get used to it, Blake. You're stuck with me now. He watched her drive away, Lily heavy in his arms, and felt something shift. They were really doing this, building something real out of all the complications and obstacles. It wouldn't be easy. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the things worth having never were. The autumn after their lake house weekend brought changes neither of them had planned for, but both seemed ready to accept. Victoria started spending more nights at Ethan's apartment than her own, her expensive downtown loft gathering dust while she learned the rhythms of kindergarten drop-offs and bedtime routines. It was a strange reversal, the CEO of a billion-dollar company eating fish sticks at a cramped kitchen table, helping a 5-year-old sound out spelling words, folding laundry that wasn't hers. But she didn't complain. If anything, she seemed lighter, less burdened by the constant weight of being Victoria Hale, successful businesswoman, and more comfortable just being Victoria, the person who existed outside of conference rooms and quarterly reports. Ethan noticed it one evening in October. They were cooking dinner together, Victoria chopping vegetables while he handled the stove, Lily at the table working on a drawing, when Victoria laughed at something Lily said about a kid at school. It was a real laugh, unguarded and easy, and Ethan realized he'd never heard her laugh like that at the office. Never seen her this relaxed. What? Victoria asked, catching him staring. Nothing. You just seem happy. I am happy. She said it like she was surprised by the discovery. Is that weird? No, it's good. Lily looked up from her drawing. Are you staying over tonight? If that's okay with you, Victoria said. It's okay. But you have to read me 2 stories. Daddy only does 1. Lily, that's not fair. Deal, Victoria interrupted, grinning at Lily's triumphant expression. 2 stories it is. Later, after Lily was asleep and they were cleaning up the kitchen, Victoria brought up something she'd been thinking about. I've been looking at houses. Ethan almost dropped the plate he was washing. Houses? Well, apartments. Bigger ones. With an extra bedroom. She wasn't looking at him, focusing intently on wiping down the counter. I thought, if we're doing this, if we're building something, maybe we should have space that's ours. Not mine, not yours. Ours. You want to move in together. I want us to have a home together. Yes. Victoria finally looked at him. Unless you think it's too soon, or if you're not ready. I don't want to push. I'm not saying no. I'm just surprised. Why? We're together every night anyway, and Lily's already asked me twice why I don't just live here. Victoria set down the cloth. I know it's a big step. I know there are logistics to figure out, but I'm tired of living in 2 places. I want to wake up next to you every morning without having to plan it 3 days in advance. Ethan dried his hands, walked over to her. What about your place downtown? I'll keep it. Use it as an office or a crash spot for late nights. But I don't want it to be where I live. She took his hands. I want to live with you and Lily. Build something that feels like family. The word family hit him harder than expected. He'd been a family with Lily for 5 years, just the 2 of them, and he'd convinced himself that was enough. But hearing Victoria say it, hearing her choose to be part of what he'd built, made him realize how much he'd wanted this without admitting it. Okay, he said. Okay? Let's find a place. Together. Victoria's smile was bright enough to light the entire kitchen. She kissed him, and Ethan felt something settle that he hadn't known was unsettled. This was happening. They were really doing this. They spent the next month looking at apartments, dragging Lily along to viewings where she'd announce her opinions with brutal 5-year-old honesty. Too small. Smells weird. No dishwasher meant more work for Daddy. The realtor looked increasingly exhausted by the 3rd weekend. They finally found a place in November, a 3-bedroom in a neighborhood halfway between Ethan's old apartment and Victoria's office. Big windows, good schools nearby, a kitchen that could fit all 3 of them comfortably. Lily declared it perfect because the 2nd bedroom had a window seat where she could read. It's more expensive than what I'm paying now, Ethan pointed out as they walked through it again, just the 2 of them while Lily was at school. We'll split it, Victoria said. Proportionally to income if you want, or 50-50, whatever makes sense. Victoria, you make 10 times what I do. Proportional doesn't seem fair. Fair is what we decide it is. She turned to face him. I make more money, yes. But you're the one who's been raising a child alone for 5 years. managing on a single income. That has value too. I'm not doing you a favor by contributing more. I'm investing in our life together. Ethan had never thought about it that way, had always felt vaguely ashamed that he couldn't provide more, that he was still renting at 32 while his peers were buying houses. But Victoria was looking at him like his contributions mattered just as much as hers, even if they looked different on paper. Okay, he said, proportional to income. But I cover groceries and utilities. Deal. They signed the lease that afternoon, told Lily over ice cream, and she screamed so loud the entire shop turned to look. The next few weeks were a blur of packing, coordinating movers, trying to merge two separate lives into one shared space. Victoria's expensive furniture mixed with Ethan's IKEA pieces. Her art collection hung next to Lily's crayon drawings. His coffee maker sat next to her espresso machine, both of them necessary apparently. The office noticed the change immediately. Victoria's assistant mentioned seeing moving boxes. Marcus asked if Ethan was shacking up with the boss, a comment that would have bothered him a year ago, but now just made him roll his eyes. People talked, but the gossip had lost its teeth. They were just another couple navigating the complications of work and home life. What surprised Ethan was how naturally it all fell into place. He'd expected friction, territorial disputes, the inevitable clash of someone used to living alone trying to share space with a man and his daughter. But Victoria adapted. She learned Lily's routines, started grocery shopping without being asked, figured out which toys could be left out and which needed to be put away before someone stepped on them in the dark. She wasn't perfect at it. She forgot about early school days twice, tried to help with homework using methods that confused Lily more, and once accidentally threw away a school project that looked like trash. But she apologized when she messed up, asked Ethan for guidance instead of pretending she knew best, and most importantly, kept showing up. Lily, for her part, adapted too. She started calling Victoria by her first name instead of Daddy's friend, left drawings on Victoria's desk, asked her opinion on important matters like which stuffed animal should sleep on the bed versus the shelf. Small integrations that suggested she'd accepted Victoria as a permanent fixture. The first real test came in December when Sarah called to discuss holiday arrangements. She wanted Lily for Christmas week, a request that made Ethan's chest tighten with immediate resistance. Christmas was their tradition, just him and Lily making cookies, watching movies, opening presents at dawn. The idea of sharing it felt wrong. I know you're upset, Victoria said after he hung up, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. But maybe it's not the worst thing. She left. She doesn't get Christmas. She's still Lily's mother. Being a mother is more than biology. It's showing up, consistently, not just when it's convenient. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You're right, but Lily loves her anyway, and denying her time with Sarah doesn't change that. It just makes Lily feel like she has to choose. Ethan knew she was right. Hated it, but knew it. She's going to be disappointed. Sarah will promise things she won't deliver. She'll make Lily feel important for a week and then disappear again. Probably, but that's Sarah's failure, not yours. And Lily will come home to you when it's over. To us. To the life that's stable and safe. Victoria took his hand. You can't protect her from disappointment. You can only be there after it happens. So Ethan agreed to Christmas week, watching Lily's excitement over the phone call with Sarah and trying not to feel like he was losing something. They celebrated early, decorating their new apartment together, making cookies with enough food coloring to stain everyone's hands, opening presents on December 23rd. Lily loved the dinosaur book set Victoria bought her, and the fact that Victoria had clearly researched which dinosaurs were currently considered most scientifically interesting. When Lily left with Sarah on Christmas Eve, hugging Ethan tight and promising to FaceTime every day, the apartment felt too quiet. Ethan stood in the doorway long after Sarah's car disappeared, Victoria's hand on his shoulder. She'll be okay, Victoria said softly. I know. Doesn't make it easier. They spent Christmas Day alone together, the first time in years Ethan hadn't built the entire day around Lily's schedule. It felt strange. Wrong at first, then gradually something else. They slept late, made elaborate breakfast, watched movies neither of them had time for usually. Victoria gave him a watch. Simple, practical, with an inscription on the back. For all the time we have. He gave her a framed photo of the three of them at the lake house, all of them laughing at something Lily had said. I love it, Victoria said, studying the photo. We look like a family. We are a family. She looked up at him, eyes bright. Yeah, we are. Lily came home on New Year's Eve, full of stories about London and presents and her half-brother. She talked for an hour straight while Ethan unpacked her suitcase, Victoria making hot chocolate in the kitchen. But that night, after the stories ran out, Lily climbed into Ethan's lap and was quiet for a long time. Did you have fun? He asked gently. Yeah, but I missed you. She looked up at him with serious eyes. Mommy's house is big and nice, but it doesn't feel like home. Where does feel like home? Here, with you and Victoria. She paused. Is that okay? That I like being here better? Ethan's throat tightened. Yeah, sweetheart. That's more than okay. Mommy was sad when I told her. That's not your fault. Grown-ups make choices, and sometimes those choices have consequences. Your mom chose to live far away. That means you're going to feel more at home here. That's natural. Lily seemed to accept this, settling against his chest. I'm glad we have Victoria now. So you're not lonely anymore. Ethan hadn't realized Lily had picked up on his loneliness all those years, had thought he'd hidden it well behind competence and routine. But kids saw more than adults gave them credit for. I'm glad too, he said, holding her close. The new year brought changes at work. The company was expanding, opening a new office on the West Coast, and Victoria needed someone to lead the technical team there. It was a promotion, a significant one, with a title and salary that reflected the responsibility. She offered it to Ethan during a formal meeting, HR present to document everything. I want to be clear, Victoria said, her voice professional. This offer is based entirely on merit. Your work over the past year has been exceptional. The project we completed together demonstrated your leadership capabilities. HR has reviewed the decision and confirmed there's no conflict of interest. Ethan looked at the offer letter, the numbers that would change his life. That would mean financial security for Lily, the ability to save for college, to stop worrying about every unexpected expense. It was everything he'd worked toward for years. It was also across the country. The position requires relocation to San Francisco, Victoria continued. The company would cover moving expenses, and we'd provide housing assistance. It's a significant opportunity, and if I turn it down, then you turn it down. No repercussions. You're valued here regardless. She met his eyes. But you should know, you've earned this. Not because of our relationship, because you're good at what you do. Ethan took the offer letter home, spent the evening reading it while Victoria gave Lily a bath. When they were both in bed, he sat on the couch with Victoria and laid out the dilemma. It's an incredible opportunity, he said, and I'm grateful you thought of me, but I can't move to San Francisco. Lily's school is here, her friends, her stability, and we just moved into this apartment. I know. So why offer it? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Because you deserve to know you were considered, to see in writing that your career advancement isn't limited by our relationship. She took his hand. And because I wanted you to make the choice yourself, not have it made for you. The choice is easy. I'm staying here. Is it? Because it's okay if part of you wants to go, if part of you resents being tied to this city because of Lily and me. Ethan had been afraid of that, afraid that turning down opportunities would build into resentment over time, poisoning what they'd built. But sitting here, in their apartment, thinking about Lily asleep in the next room and Victoria beside him, he realized the truth. I don't resent it, he said slowly. A year ago, maybe I would have. A year ago, I was so focused on just surviving that I couldn't see past the next problem. But now, he gestured around the apartment. This is what I want. Not just default to because I have to, but actual choice. You and Lily and this life we're building. That's worth more than any title. You're sure? I'm sure. He paused. But I do want the promotion. Just here, not San Francisco. Victoria smiled. I think we can arrange that. The promotion came through in February. Senior technical lead, managing a team of 12, reporting directly to Victoria, but with enough organizational separation that HR approved it without hesitation. The raise was significant, and Ethan found himself in the strange position of actually having money left over at the end of the month. He started a college fund for Lily, paid off his car, and took Victoria to an actual nice restaurant instead of their usual takeout rotation. This feels weird, he said, looking at the menu where entrees cost more than he used to spend on groceries. Good weird or bad weird? Just weird. I'm not used to not worrying about money. Victoria set down her menu. You earned this, the promotion, the salary, all of it. You know that, right? Intellectually, yes. But there's this voice in my head that keeps saying I got lucky, that I'm here because I was in the right place at the right time. Luck might have gotten you in the door. Your work kept you there. She reached across the table, took his hand. I've worked with a lot of developers over the years. You're one of the best I've seen, not because of our relationship, despite the complications it created. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that his success was earned, not gifted. But years of struggling had taught him to be suspicious of good fortune, to wait for the other shoe to drop. I'm working on it, he said finally. The believing part. I know, and I'll keep reminding you until you do. The spring brought another unexpected challenge. Lily's school had a father-daughter dance in April, an event Ethan had attended solo for the past 2 years while Lily watched other kids arrive with both parents. But this year, as they were looking at the flyer, Lily had a question. Can Victoria come too? Ethan glanced at Victoria, who was reading on the couch. It's a father-daughter dance, sweetheart. But Emma's bringing her mom and her mom's girlfriend. The school said families can bring whoever they want. Lily looked at Victoria hopefully. Your family. Victoria looked surprised, touched. I'd love to come if you want me there. But it's your special night with your dad. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding. I want you there. Lily said it with the absolute certainty of childhood. Please. So the three of them went to the father-daughter dance. Lily in a dress she'd picked out herself, Ethan in a suit that actually fit for once, Victoria in elegant pants and a silk blouse. Other families stared, some with curiosity, some with judgment. Ethan felt Victoria tense beside him, her CEO armor starting to slide into place. But Lily grabbed both their hands and pulled them onto the dance floor, and suddenly it didn't matter what anyone else thought. They were there together, the three of them, making memories that would last longer than any gossip. Halfway through the evening, Emma's mom, Jennifer, the one who'd asked about Ethan needing adult conversation months ago, approached with wine from the parents' table. You two look happy. We are, Victoria said, a hint of defiance in her voice. Good. Ethan's been alone too long. Lily needs more people who care about her. Jennifer smiled. For what it's worth, I think you're good for them. Both of them. It was a small moment of acceptance, but it meant something. Proof that not everyone was judging, that some people could see past the unconventional setup to what actually mattered. The dance ended with Lily falling asleep in the car on the way home, clutching a balloon and wearing a plastic tiara. Ethan carried her up to the apartment, Victoria following with Lily's shoes and jacket. They got her into pajamas without waking her, tucked her in with the stuffed rabbit that had been her companion since infancy. Thank you for coming tonight, Ethan said as they stood in Lily's doorway watching her sleep. Thank you for letting me be part of it. You're part of everything now. You know that, right? Victoria nodded, but there was something in her expression. Uncertainty maybe, or fear. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life, the one with responsibilities and complications, instead of the freedom to just do whatever you want? Ethan thought about the question, about the life he might have had if Sarah hadn't left, if Lily hadn't needed him, if he'd made different choices. No, I don't regret it. This life, you and Lily and the boring routine of it all, this is what I want. Not what I settled for, what I actively choose. Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard. Easy things don't mean anything. But this? He gestured around the apartment at their life together. This means everything. Victoria kissed him then, soft and grateful, and they stood in the hallway for a long moment, both of them understanding that they'd built something rare, something that hadn't been handed to them but constructed piece by piece through choice and effort and showing up even when it was difficult. The moment that changed everything came in late May. Ethan had noticed Victoria being distant for a few days, distracted, disappearing to take phone calls, spending more time in her home office. He'd asked if something was wrong, but she'd brushed it off as work stress. Bored stuff. Nothing to worry about. But on a Friday evening, After Lily was asleep, Victoria came out of the office looking pale and shaken. She sat down on the couch next to Ethan, hands trembling slightly. "I need to tell you something," she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "I got an offer to sell the company." Of all the things he'd been expecting, that wasn't it. "What?" "A tech giant wants to acquire us. Full buyout. They approached the board 3 weeks ago, made an offer we can't really refuse. It's enough to make everyone rich. More than that. Generationally wealthy." Victoria was talking fast, nervous. "The board wants to take it. Most of the shareholders want to take it, and what do you want?" She looked at him with exhausted eyes. "I don't know. That company is my entire identity. I built it from nothing. Selling it feels like giving up, like admitting I can't take it further. But keeping it means more pressure, more growth expectations, more years of working 80 hours a week." "What happens to your job if you sell?" "They want me to stay on for 2 years as a consultant. Advisory role, minimal hours, ridiculous salary. After that, I'm free to do whatever I want." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know how insane that sounds? Free to do whatever I want. I haven't had that since I was 22. Ethan processed this, trying to understand what it meant for them. "What do you want to do?" "I want—" Victoria stopped, took a breath. "I want to be here more, with you and Lily. I want to have dinner together every night instead of working through it. I want to go to school events without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not Victoria Hale, CEO." "So sell." "It's not that simple." "Why not? You just said the board wants it, the shareholders want it, and you want a different life. What's holding you back?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Fear, I guess, that if I'm not the CEO, I'm nobody, that I'll lose myself without the job defining me." But Ethan understood that better than she probably realized. He'd defined himself as a single father for so long that adding Victoria to his life had forced him to remember he was more than just Lily's dad, that he could be a partner, a professional, a person with wants beyond his daughter's needs. "You're not the job," he said. "You're the person who figured out how to run a company and have a relationship, who learned to read bedtime stories and negotiate with 5-year-olds, who chose to be here even when it was hard." He took her hand. "That person exists whether you're a CEO or not." "What if I hate it? What if I sell and then regret it and resent you for encouraging me?" "Then we'll deal with it. Together." "But Victoria," he made her look at him. "You've spent 8 years building something incredible. You've proven everything you needed to prove. Maybe it's okay to let someone else take it from here." She leaned against him, and he felt her breathing slowly steady. The sale would close in September, 2 years consulting after that. "I'd have to travel sometimes, attend board meetings, but mostly I'd be here." "How does that sound?" "Terrifying, and like exactly what I want." They talked through the night, weighing options, discussing logistics, planning what life might look like if Victoria wasn't tethered to the constant demands of leadership. By the time the sun started rising, Victoria had made her decision. She'd recommend the sale to the board, serve out her consulting agreement, and then figure out what came next. The announcement went public in June. The tech world exploded with speculation and analysis, articles about Victoria Hale's legacy and what her exit meant for female CEOs. Ethan watched her handle the media circus with the same grace she brought to everything, answering questions without revealing too much, maintaining the professional mask even as she was actively planning her escape. The office reacted with mixed emotions. Some people were excited about the acquisition and the stock options that suddenly had real value. Others worried about layoffs and cultural changes. Marcus cornered Ethan in the break room to ask if he'd known in advance. "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "Victoria told me a few weeks ago." "And you're okay with it? Your girlfriend selling the company?" "She's not just my girlfriend. She's her own person making her own decisions. And yeah, I'm okay with it." "But what about you? Your job?" "The acquiring company wants to keep the technical team intact. My job is safe. Probably more stable than it was before, honestly." Marcus seemed reassured by this, but Ethan could see the real question behind his eyes. "What happens to you and Victoria when she's not your boss anymore? Do you still work without the power dynamic?" Ethan had wondered the same thing. Their entire relationship had been built around navigating complicated hierarchies and competing demands. What would they be without that friction? He got his answer in August, 2 months before the sale closed. They were at the lake house for the weekend, a now regular escape that Lily looked forward to all month. They just put Lily to bed and were sitting on the deck when Victoria spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about what happens after the sale closes." "Okay. I don't want to just retire and do nothing. I'm not wired that way. But I also don't want another CEO position or anything that demands that level of commitment." She turned to face him. "I was thinking about starting something smaller, a consulting firm maybe, or an incubator for women-led startups. Something I can control the hours for." "That sounds good. And I was thinking, once the 2-year consulting period is up, maybe we could get married." Ethan's brain short-circuited. "What?" "I know it's forward, and we can wait if you want. Do the traditional thing where you propose. But I've spent my whole life waiting for the right time, and I'm tired of it. So I'm asking, do you want to marry me?" Ethan stared at her, this brilliant woman who'd somehow decided he was worth building a life with, and realized the answer had been obvious for months. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, I want to marry you. Not in 2 years. Sooner." "Why wait?" Victoria laughed, surprised and relieved. "I don't know. I thought you'd want time to think about it." "I've been thinking about it since the father-daughter dance. Since before that, probably." He took her hands. "You're my family, Victoria. You have been for a while now. The wedding is just making it official. Lily will want dinosaurs, obviously. And your parents will want to meet me first. They're flying out next month, already arranged it." Victoria's eyes widened. "You were planning this?" "Not planning exactly, just hoping, preparing." He kissed her softly. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay." They told Lily the next morning over breakfast. She screamed again, loud enough to scare birds out of nearby trees, and immediately started planning the wedding with the intensity of a military operation. Victoria would wear a dress with sparkles. Ethan would wear his nice suit. There would be a dinosaur cake. Non-negotiable. "What about your mom?" Lily asked suddenly. "Will she come?" It was the first time Lily had mentioned Sarah in the context of the wedding. Ethan and Victoria exchanged a glance. "We'll invite her," Ethan said carefully, "but I don't know if she'll come. She might be busy or too far away." "Okay." Lily seemed to accept this with the resilience she'd developed around her mother's inconsistency. "Can Emma be in the wedding?" "Absolutely." They spent the rest of breakfast planning details. Lily's enthusiasm infectious. And watching Victoria engage fully in the conversation, asking Lily's opinion, taking notes on the dinosaur theme, treating a 5-year-old's ideas with genuine respect, Ethan felt something settle that he hadn't known was unsettled. This was right. All of it. The company sale closed in September as planned. Victoria's last day as CEO was surprisingly emotional. A company-wide meeting where she thanked everyone, a reception where people she'd worked with for years said goodbye, a moment standing in her empty office looking at the space that had defined her for so long. Ethan came to pick her up, found her standing by the window with tears on her face. "You okay?" "Yeah, it's strange, ending something I worked so hard to build." "You're not ending it, you're letting it continue without you." "That's different." She turned to face him. "When did you get so wise?" "I have a good teacher." They left the office together, Victoria taking nothing but a small box of personal items. Everything else, the desk, the art, the carefully curated professional image, stayed behind for whoever came next. The wedding happened in November, a small ceremony at the lake house with immediate family and close friends. Lily wore a dress with dinosaur patterns that she'd found online and insisted was perfect. Emma stood next to her as junior bridesmaid, taking the role very seriously. Ethan's parents flew in from Florida, and his mother cried through the entire ceremony. Victoria's parents came from Connecticut, stiff and formal at first, but gradually relaxing as Lily charmed them with dinosaur facts. Sarah didn't come. She'd been invited, had said she'd try to make it, but called the morning of the wedding with an excuse about work commitments. Lily was disappointed but not surprised, and Victoria distracted her by asking for help with last-minute decorations. The ceremony itself was simple. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Victoria promising to show up, to be present, to choose their family even when work beckoned. Ethan promising to believe in himself, to accept help when offered, to build a life based on choice rather than obligation. Lily stood between them, holding the rings, beaming with pride at being part of something important. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lily cheered louder than anyone. The reception was casual, barbecue and dancing, Lily and Emma running around with sparklers. Adults mingling in that easy way that happens when everyone actually likes each other. Marcus gave a speech about how Ethan had gone from depressed single dad to disgustingly happy husband, and how Victoria had gone from terrifying boss to someone who actually smiled at company events. Late in the evening, after Lily had crashed from sugar and excitement, Ethan and Victoria stood at the edge of the lake watching the sunset. They'd done this dozens of times over the past year, but it felt different now, permanent in a way it hadn't before. "Do you think we'll be okay?" Victoria asked quietly. "Long term, with all the complications?" "I think we'll fight sometimes, struggle sometimes, have days where we question everything." Ethan took her hand. "But yeah, I think we'll be okay." "What makes you so sure?" "Because we've already handled the hard part. Everything else is just details." Victoria leaned against him, and they stood like that as the sun disappeared behind the trees, both of them understanding that they'd built something that would outlast the initial spark, something based on choice and effort and showing up even when it was hard. The life they built together after the wedding wasn't perfect. Victoria struggled with the transition from CEO to consultant, missing the constant pressure and immediate importance of her old role. Ethan dealt with imposter syndrome as he took on more leadership responsibilities at work. Lily had normal kid problems, friend drama, homework struggles, occasional meltdowns about unfairness, but they handled it together. Victoria started her consulting firm, helping other women navigate the tech world, and found satisfaction in mentoring instead of managing. Ethan grew into his leadership role, eventually becoming CTO of the merged company, proving that his success had been earned through years of solid work. Lily thrived with two parents who were present and engaged, developing confidence that came from knowing she was loved consistently. Sarah remained inconsistent, birthday cards that arrived late, promised visits that didn't materialize, occasional guilt-driven phone calls. But Lily learned to accept this without letting it define her. She had stability at home, people who showed up reliably, and that made Sarah's absence hurt less over time. On their first anniversary, Ethan and Victoria returned to the lake house with Lily. They cooked dinner together, played board games, told stories about the past year. After Lily went to bed, they sat on the deck like they had a year earlier, looking at stars and processing how far they'd come. "I was thinking," Victoria said, "maybe we should make this place available to other people, families who need a break but can't afford it. Turn it into something useful instead of just sitting empty." "That's a good idea. I've been talking to a nonprofit about it. They could manage the bookings, handle maintenance. We'd cover costs, but they'd do the work." Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd gone from ruthlessly focused CEO to someone thinking about how to help strangers, and felt overwhelming gratitude. "When did you get so generous?" "I learned from you. You've been giving to Lily for 5 years without asking for anything back. That's generosity. That's parenting." "Same thing sometimes." Victoria took his hand. "I was so convinced that success meant climbing higher, achieving more, never stopping. But you showed me that success can also mean showing up for dinner, reading bedtime stories, choosing to be present instead of important." "You're still important." "Maybe, but I'm also happy, and I never thought I could have both." They sat in comfortable silence, both of them understanding that they'd stumbled into something rare. Not a fairy tale romance where everything was easy, but a real partnership built on mutual respect and willingness to grow. They'd fought through gossip and complications, navigated power dynamics and single parenthood, chosen each other repeatedly even when it was hard. And in doing so, they'd built something that would last. Not because it was perfect, but because they'd both stopped waiting for perfect and started working with what was real. Inside the house, Lily stirred in her sleep, called out. Ethan started to get up, but Victoria was already moving. "I've got her." He watched her disappear inside, heard the soft murmur of Victoria's voice as she settled Lily back to sleep. A year ago, Victoria wouldn't have known how to handle a child's nightmare. Now, it was second nature. She'd learned because she'd wanted to, because being part of their family mattered enough to do the hard work of figuring it out. When Victoria came back out, she looked tired but content. She had a bad dream, but she's okay now. "Thank you," For what? For staying, for choosing this even when it was messy and complicated. Victoria sat back down, pulled him close. Thank you for letting me, for seeing past the CEO and finding the person underneath. They stayed like that until the cold drove them inside, both of them grateful for the strange series of events that had brought them together. A storm, a ride home, a choice to be honest about what they wanted instead of hiding behind fear and practicality. Years later, when people asked how they'd made it work, the power dynamic, the scrutiny, the complications, Ethan would think back to this moment, to standing on a deck with the woman he loved, choosing presence over perfection, building something real out of the messiness of actual life. The answer was simple, even if living it wasn't. They showed up. Every day in small ways and large ones, they chose each other. And that choice, repeated over time, had built something strong enough to weather anything. That was the lesson neither of them had expected to learn. That love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing or circumstances aligning. It was about showing up when it was hard, staying when it was easier to leave, choosing to build something together even when the blueprint was unclear. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.